Hello and welcome back to the second episode of the Definitive Draft podcast. Of course, this is with Raptors Republic. I'm your host, Samson Folk, and today the Definitive Evan Mobley podcast. And I'm joined by draft analyst, a guy whose takes I've always admired and whose voice notes and threads on Twitter about Mobley really made me think, wow, this is the guy I need to bring on to talk about him. Not only that, but he sent me a Medium article that he wrote, which will also be linked. Of course, things have progressed since then. But Ben Pfeifer here to talk about Evan Mobley. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk about Mobley. I've spent plenty of time tweeting and talking about him, even on Prep to Pro many ages ago. Excited to do this today.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. I'm excited to lean on your expertise as I am wont to do. So first things first, let's do the sales pitch. I know for a fact that Evan Mobley has higher stock, or it seems that he has higher stock than, let's say, Jalen Suggs, for example. Jalen Green, for some people, can go as high as 2, maybe 1, depending on the team, depending on what they think of that prospect. But Mobley, I think the consensus is that he's going to be 2 or 3. If he falls to 4, that should be a really big deal. And if that happens, what would you say to excite Raptors fans who are now looking at Evan Mobley at the 4th pick?
Oh, God. Just imagine just an ultra scalable potential defensive superstar, big prospect who can basically do everything on offense, scale back in a smaller role with some higher end outcomes to do self-creation in a larger role. He's just, a spectacular big man prospect who I don't think there's an easy comparison for, just because he's so unique. In terms of, I think the ceiling for him, I'm definitely probably one of the higher people on Evan Mobley. Not comparison wise, but he really has that, number two offense, defensive anchor on a championship team potential. So Anthony Davis, Kevin Garnett, not necessarily comparing them to those players stylistically, but I really do believe that he has that level of impact at his ceiling, along with being, in my opinion, one of if not the safest players in this draft to be a positive NBA player as well. So it's really hard to go wrong with Mobley. I think he's someone who you could, while I'm also a huge Cade guy, I think Cade's number 1 pretty clearly, but I like Mobley enough to where I think, the right team and the right fit could take him number 1, and that would be the right decision.
Okay, excellent. For the listener, scalable means that your skill set is that it could fit alongside a lot of other players.
Yes,
and
exactly.
It can, for example, Steph Curry, his offense is extremely scalable because it's so efficient and it can pair with a lot of different players, whereas DeMar DeRozan, his offensive style isn't that scalable because it's harder to plug him in off ball. So Evan Mobley being scalable, a lot of people talk about his jump shot. Is that coming along? Is it already there? The idea of a stretch 5 has kind of been, it's not really true in the NBA. There's not very many players who can do it, but we hear it talked about a lot. Basically, Karl Anthony Towns, a couple other guys can do it for weeks at a time, but there's not a ton of incredible shooters at that position. What do you make of Mobley's jump shot and how it will progress or translate to the NBA?
I honestly just touch on scalability again, because that was a great point you made about scalability, fitting next to other players, but specifically fitting next to stars. Like a guy like DeMar DeRozan, like you mentioned, at least the traditional idea of DeRozan, he can fit next to role players, like guys who can, cut and shoot and make secondary passes, but he's not as useful next to ball dominant stars who need possessions like he does to be really valuable. Whereas Steph is the greatest off-ball player of all time, or someone like Lowry who's been ultra scalable in his Raptors prime, been able to work next to more ball dominant stars while carrying his own offensive load. And I think that's really the appeal with Evan Mobley for a lot of reasons offensively. His jumper, I think, being one of them, if not, maybe not the main reason. I think he's going to shoot. I'd be pretty surprised if he doesn't. You're right. Mobley is not stretch 5. I don't think he's going to be an amazing shooter. Like you said, there are very few true 7-footers who are really great 3-point threats. It's like you said, it's like Jokic, Cat, like Jaren Jackson, like not
Vooch, depending on the context.
Yeah, I mean, like Durant, obviously, but he's different. Mobley doesn't need that. Like with how good he is elsewhere, and all the other things he does, like he doesn't need that. I think really for scaling purposes, all he really needs, I don't even think because he's gonna be like an elite roll man and like garbage guy and passers, like those are all scalable traits. But for his high end scalability next to more ball dominant stars who require spacing, because spacing is so important, all he really needs is to be a threatening catch and shoot player, which one like is not that difficult. Like we see players develop reliable enough catch and shoot jumpers, like corner threes, all the time. I'm not saying it's easy or anything, but it's not crazy difficult. And Mobley's foundation is at this point for his age and size and skill level is really, really good. It's above average, I think, for bigs at his age for sure. I'm like not a mechanics person, and he definitely has mechanical issues. The elbow flares. It's not the most fluid shot. It's very sectioned at this point. But like his balance is all right. He's a hop shooter. Like he hops into his shots well. He generates power nicely, and he has shown the ability to extend out to three, to even shoot some threes off of the dribble, which is the holy grail for tall pull-up shooters. And if I was Evan Mobley's, in charge of Evan Mobley's development, I would be instructing him to be shooting pull-up jumpers and pull-up threes, whether in games or in practices, as early as possible, because I want that to be a part of his game. I'm not saying it will be, but that's the direction I would choose to take with Evan Mobley, because I believe he can get there. And then I think like all he really needs is to be able to draw closeouts with his catch and shoot jumper, because he can attack off the bounce. In that case, you can't help off of him, which is really the issue with those non-shooters. Is if you give the defense, especially a good defense, like a +1, like allow someone to roam like a Draymond Green, then you're gonna lose so much offensively. So yeah, I think Mobley is going to shoot. Like maybe his jumper doesn't get as much love as other bigs, because like I feel like he does so much other stuff. Like I feel like if you threw his jumper on a lot of like lesser talked about big prospects, people would feel better about his shot than otherwise. Like he's not, the indicators aren't wonderful. Like he's a fine free throw shooter. The best indicator to me, which I've done research on, and others as well, is he's an amazing like pull up 2 shooter when it comes to like his like not just his little floaters and push shots, which we'll get into, but like his like 15, 17 foot pull up hang dribble jumpers, which is ridiculously impressive for a teenager. And I think we've seen lots of examples of players really proficient in this area in college, maybe didn't extend out to range. Thinking like Kawhi Leonard, Chris Middleton, Pascal Siakam as an example. So I think Mobley, that's certainly in the cards for Mobley. So I would definitely expect him to be a good enough shooter, good enough to not be a problem for sure. And I think, there are outcomes in his range where he is a genuinely good shooter.
Okay, so let's dig a little bit into more passive offense. I think everybody can tell with his length. Catch radius is something that Ben Taylor has maybe brought it into the lexicon, into the conversation for bigs on the roll more often. Mobley, as far as catch radius, something you've touched on before as well. He should be very dangerous on the lob and on the short roll. It's just there's a huge window you can get him to the ball. As we've seen in the playoffs, getting the ball to a big going downhill is really, really important to get around certain types of defense, traps, playing at the level, that kind of stuff. And bigs like Gobert and Porzingis particularly paid because they don't have the dexterity to deal with the ball in the middle of the floor. It's either a charge waiting to happen or they're going to make the absolute simplest read. What is it about Mobley's game that makes you see that he can be a kind of connecting player on the floor like that?
Mobley is uniquely qualified to do kind of all of the things that you mentioned that Gobert and Porzingis can't, actually, pretty specifically. Like you mentioned, I think like the most scalable thing is like, even if like, let's say like either a low-end outcome or in a certain matchup, Mobley can't self-create. He's not able to, the shooting isn't working. He's not able to work in the post or the short mid-range, the face-up jumper or out of horn or whatever offense. He can always just fall back to being an elite roll man. But like you said, his catch radius is really absurd. You're totally spot on there. Like USC didn't have any particularly great passers on that roster. They had some guys who could do it, but they'd often trot out like 4 guys 6'8" plus, with Mobley being the definite best playmaker on the floor. Mobley and his brother Isaiah as well. But so Evan often had to work with some passes that weren't the greatest and make the most of limited playmaking and spacing and just a poor offensive construction. And like his length, like you said, his length is incredible. Like he can catch balls that few guys can't. Just imagining him with a passer like Luka or LaMelo placing the ball in exactly the right spot, him going up to get it. And then like he is also uniquely coordinated, and that's evident in watching even a second like a play of his highlights. He just does not move like a 7-footer. You watch him and you go, oh, he's a nice mover for someone who's like 6'6" or 6'8", but then you're like, no, he's genuinely 7 feet tall. He's so coordinated. Like he can rotate his arms and catch the ball in midair. Honestly, like you'll see him just like tap in lobs and like even when he's not able to dunk them or catch them clean, like you'll see him get a tap in or corral the ball where he definitely shouldn't be able to. And then you mentioned like his ability to like process on the short roll. Like he solves problems like a veteran at this point. And like it's so fun to watch him like do that, but also figure things out and make things work with his tools because he's 19, he's not perfect, he's still learning, obviously. Like there are plays where he will, like you mentioned, he'll catch the ball on the short roll, and he'll have a guy come in to take a charge. And instead of barreling into them like some less coordinated, burlier centers might, he has the coordination to either whip a quick pass to the weak corner, the short roll, or a dump off, or he can just stop, wait for the charging defender to either fall over or like lose balance and just shoot a little push shot over them. So yeah, I think Mobley can uniquely counter pretty much every pick and roll coverage as a big, because like he's going to be great operating in space. Definitely can have trouble with some more better off-ball defenses and more complex schemes. There were some instances where players were really smart off-ball defenders and good defensive teams gave him trouble. But again, he's still learning and still figuring out how to process complex coverages. And there's as there is with every prospect, there's going to be a learning curve, and that's to be expected. But I think Mobley has such a great foundation as a processor of the floor. Like he reads the game like few big man prospects I've ever seen, or honestly few prospects really. Like he's pretty special in that regard on the roll. So yeah, I mean he counters pretty much everything there. I mean he can pop out as well. He has an answer for basically every problem, which is what makes him so special.
Is there a specific context where you've seen him struggle, as you talked about, where he might have been the highest playmaking talent on the floor, and let's say the ball wasn't ending up in his hands in the game, that off ball, is there a way for him to insert himself into games like that? How is his screen craft creating? Like, is he good at flipping? Can he flatten? Can he do all that kind of stuff? Is he carving out space for his guards? All that kind of stuff. What do you make of his wheel greasing game, let's say?
Yeah, he's a pretty good screener. I don't think he's anything incredible. Freshman bigs are like mostly bad screeners. Like, or this age bigs are almost always bad screeners. I think he has his moments with like the coordinated he has like ridiculously high hips, which is a concern. And in terms of adding muscle, and I mean it doesn't affect his movement, but at this point, but it could in the future. So like, but that does aid him as a screener at times where he's able to get really wide in his base. Like you said, different screen angles. He is like, but like what he is like a really good off-ball screener. Like he will like scram switch guys out and like set off-ball screens. That look impromptu enough. Like they could be schemed in, but I don't think a lot of them are. He's a really good cutter as well when he's empowered to do that. That's often not his role, but he can definitely cut as well. And then it's just like a garbage man. Like he's going to be really effective. Like he wasn't the best offensive rebounder by the numbers this year. And the strength is great, but he's so quick vertically, really physical, super physical, long, can crowd those. And then it's like as like a dunker spot finisher, like he is an amazing finisher. It's like he doesn't need a play drawn up for him. Like you don't need a roll, to get him on the roll or an Iverson cut or like a UCLA cut or something. Like if you just find him in the dunker spot, he can rise so quickly off of usually 2 feet, like power hop into his shot and then just like go straight up and down, dunk it. Like he doesn't really bother with like flash or like crazy dunks, which makes him so hard to block. Like he just goes up and down and straight in the rim, which, and you'll see him do some like vicious, like he'll, be patient, step through and just like dunk over 2 people. And like, it looks like Giannis because you just don't expect a guy to be able to standing dunk like he does until you see it. Like there are a few guys who use length as effectively as Mobley as a finisher. Like you'll often see him like do reverse layups where he genuinely like scoops his arm like under the rim, and like he's not open on the right side of the rim, say, and he just like extends his arm all the way and his fingertip is at the rim. Length and the coordination and the know-how to utilize that length is really, really great. So yeah, Mobley doesn't need any offense drawn up for him to impact. Obviously, he's going to be best when he does have that, when he is involved and is planned. But Mobley, I think he's in time going to grow as a screener, like most young bigs do. And I think he's too smart to not be willing to do that. And like he's too wired to like make the right play. And which is can be a concern for scoring development, as I can talk about later. But like he's so wired to like make the right play and like do the right read, like it's cliche, but like make winning plays. So I think as like an off-ball big, someone who does that garbage work, like the wheel greasing, like you said, I mean, he's pretty uniquely suited. The only thing is like if the strength hampers him on the rebounding, which is definitely a possibility, especially early in his career, or the screening as well. But again, those are more short-term concerns to me, as rather than something to be seriously alarmed about.
Okay, that makes me think of, particularly with young bigs, you see guys who, when they're converged on in the paint, there's a problem. But it seems like let's say, there's a lob pass where he's not being led to the rim. He has to catch it and bring it down. And obviously guards will come in and they'll dig down, they'll converge on him. There'll be pressure from a strong big behind him. If he can't go up, if he doesn't have the commensurate strength, there's another word there. If he doesn't have the requisite, sure. If he doesn't have the requisite strength to do that at that point, he will be less bothered than most bigs we see coming out of the draft with the dig down, and he'll probably be able to make better reads against a tilted defense than most of what we've seen, which is, I think, a lot of fan bases, that's their complaint with young bigs, is that they can't attack advantages. They need to be led to the rim. That's been a big thing with Wiseman this year, who's probably become underrated, but not being led to the rim. What can he do? That kind of stuff. It sounds like Mobley has counters built into his game. But let's do on ball then. You talked about advantage creation, a guy who can have the ball. Let's say it's the 45 extended. You might ask him to create a little bit depending on how he's feeling in the game, depending on matchup. What do you think about the building blocks of that for him?
Yeah, I think that's like where the high end offensive outcomes land. And like Mobley is not like never going to be like a primary offensive initiator on a championship team, which is why I have him below Cade, ultimately, because I think Cade can really be that, and that's so valuable. But I do think Mobley can be a really effective on ball scorer in some unique ways. I mentioned mentality. I'll touch on that. Like Mobley like has to like want to destroy people. Like he has to like believe and like internalize like he can do whatever he wants, especially like in his theoretical prime, because like he is wired right now like the perfect like scalable like off ball big, like short roll passes, like passing out of doubles, extra passes. I think which he's a great decision maker at this point. But I think if he can really so self create, like I think he might be able to at his peak. You want to see him develop that mentality, which is it's always difficult to predict to what extent and if that can be fixed at all without having insight from basically like 10 feet out. And I guess I'll work backwards. I think a lot of his stuff, like his post up game, I think is going to be fine as he develops. I don't think it'll ever be like his go-to, just because of the strength will never be incredible, just because guys built like that, like Kevin Durant, like there's only so much muscle I believe they can really add functionally with someone that's his hips is wide, his hips is high as his, but like his touch is incredible. And like I mentioned, like the length on fadeaways, hook shots, like he has these like 8, 9, 10 foot like push shot floaters that he's legitimately releasing above the rim that are just untouchable, and he can get to whenever he want. And maybe they're not like the greatest offense in the world. Like you're not building your offense around these shots, but this is efficient offense that Evan Mobley can get whenever he wants. Like you'll see, like I think like a complaint that people have about Giannis is that like he will often like catch the ball on the perimeter, or even in transition and like barrel towards the rim without a plan. And he's like he doesn't have like a intermediate game really, like an unscripted intermediate game. He has like the face up mid ranges and some hook shots. He's never gonna get walled off on a drive take a collecting dribble and just like push it over the defender from 12 feet. Like Giannis won't do that. But that's the shot Mobley wants. Obviously, Mobley doesn't have Giannis's like bump Euro steps and just, the ability to flatten guys. And that's not a comparison I'm making. I'm just stylistically thinking about, like Mobley's going to be able to get to that shot whenever he wants. And then like his handle isn't complex or anything. He doesn't need it to be. He's a guy who has legitimate burst, relative to other bigs at least, like legitimate burst, flexibility, coordination. And like I mentioned, if he can, draw closeouts, someone who I think can really get by those closeouts, like you'll see him blow by bigs and like stride to the rim with 1 or 2 steps from the 3-point arc. So yeah, I mean, I think then it's like, is he shooting pull-ups? Like, to what extent is the jumper going to be out? Seems like he's definitely going to be, a really good from the mid-range, face-up jumpers, elbow jumpers, maybe like DHO keeps, like I mentioned, the little floaters. To what extent can he extend that jumper out? I think that's definitely going to be a determiner of his ceiling. I definitely don't know. And like I said, I think it's going to depend a lot on his development, his wiring, what he's empowered to do, is his situation. It's just going to depend on what the coaching wants to do with him. But I just think like for every matchup, like yes, like I think strong guys will give Mobley issues, but unless you have like a really strong, explosive defender, Mobley can just shoot over them. I think counter Mobley theoretically is like, you have someone who can really push him off of his spot and force him into uncomfortable parts of the floor where he really has to make tough decisions. Like don't let him catch at 7, 8, 9 feet. Like make him catch at 14, 15. And there just like aren't a lot of big enough defenders, I think, who are going to be able to do that successfully at his prime. Assuming he can hit these high-end self-creation outcomes, assuming his wiring gets, improves. And then there obviously are those issues. The strength will have to improve. The shot will have to improve. And I do worry about those improving in conjunction of each other, because like I think the big question is, how do you add strength while preserving his movement? Because obviously like his movement is so unbelievably special and he has to get stronger. And it's just how do you add that strength while keeping him as fluid and coordinated and mobile and flexible as possible? And obviously I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not a strength trainer. But these are questions that whoever drafts and Mobley are going to have to answer. And, they're important questions. And then obviously, like, how do you improve his core to make his shot more fluid and smooth while, also preserving his movement and his functional strength? Like, there's definitely going to be development challenges, but all of that is, I think, again, pertaining to like his really high-end outcomes, which is important for, a top 2 pick, of course, or a top 3, top 4 pick, especially in this scenario. But yeah, I think, some non-traditional self-creation, getting back to it, like, not someone who's going to be running like high pick and rolls. I mean, I do think he can run like snug pick and rolls out of like DHOs and horn sets. I mean, he did some of that at USC. Like just thinking about putting the idea in Raptors fans' heads of like 4 or 5 snug pick and rolls with Pascal Siakam, 2 versatile ball handling bigs. I think you could do some really funky stuff with that. But yeah, I mean, I think the self-creation potential is really there. But definitely like there are definitely outcomes where Mobley isn't able to do that consistently. But like we talked about earlier, I think he's still valuable in those universes because of the scalable, off-ball big stuff.
Okay, I'll go out on a limb and feel free to correct me. I think that's what I'm going to do with this moment of the podcast. So based on what I'm hearing, based on what I've seen from film, it seems like he has the potential to be somebody who his floor is a guy who will take other bigs off the dribble, but at his current weight and his current handle, you could see smaller players be put on him at the NBA level, and they're going to get into the lower half of his body, try and push him that way, and then he'll have to become a shooter, which might dictate that the jump shot has to come along quite a bit farther. Yeah. But if that does come along, you're looking at like an extremely dangerous big, not only because his floor is a guy who will take other bigs off the dribble, but that he'll also be comfortable shooting over top of smaller players.
Yeah. I mean, it's just at what point does his core get to the point where you can't just straight bump him off of his spot? Because I mean, you'll see him stride by and burst by guys off of closeouts and drives, but you'll also see like the 6'7" college centers give him trouble because maybe it's a blocking foul, maybe it's not, but you hip check him off of his spot and his drive is halted. Obviously, Mobley is smart enough to where he can, that won't ruin a possession often, but for sure, I mean that limits his ability. Like I said, if you can get Mobley catching the ball deep enough, he can use his touch to kind of just like go over that problem. But as a perimeter initiator, yeah, I mean, I definitely think the jumper will be a counter there that he needs. Again, if he can just like rise over guys for like 16, 17 foot pull up mid ranges, then like it's not really going to matter. But if he can't do that, then he's definitely going to need to add the strength, and you're going to be able to put I mean, like I don't really think you can get away with like 6'5" strong dudes on him either way. Like that's just not realistic. But like these like 6'6", 6'7", like you could, I think early on you could totally put like OG Anunoby on Evan Mobley and give him trouble from the perimeter. Obviously Mobley, like if you let Mobley catch 11 feet in against OG, he'll just shoot over him. But further out, I could that's the kind of archetype that's going to give Mobley issues, I think. So.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, that OG is uniquely gifted in a way, and Mobley is...
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously just, one of the best defenders in the league. So
yeah.
Gives a lot of
let's dig a little bit deeper. Since this is a Raptors podcast, let's dig a little bit deeper into your idea of snug pick and rolls, DHO keeps, all that kind of stuff, particularly because he could run those with OG as well if Pascal Siakam is on the bench and they're staggering certain lineups, if Mobley ends up there, which would be a real stroke of luck for the Raptors. But Van Vliet, OG, Pascal, and the Raptors at large, what do you make of the fit there offensively? And we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about defense later.
I mean, I think it's great. Like, we often we'll talk about draft people like the Raptors as one of the development infrastructures you want young guys in, especially ones who maybe are less technically developed. Obviously, I don't think Mobley needs a particularly special infrastructure to thrive, but Toronto certainly would not be of harm. I think offensively, yeah, I mean, you can do. I mean, I'm not as privy to what specifically they do offensive schematically as you would be, or as many of listeners would be. But like you said, there's creative stuff you could do with Pascal Siakam and Evan Mobley running some snug pick and rolls or cross and twist screens, or even running some twirl actions with OG or Van Fleet involved. Getting Mobley working on curl screens, either as the screener. Using another guy's gravity to get him involved, create advantages that way, and then you can get him, around that 10-foot area, that dunker spot where he's going to thrive. And then I think we didn't see this really at all at USC, but I wonder if there's utility to using Mobley as the guy just screening for him, because I mean, to me, the best way, I think this stuff has been talked about, the best way to attack slower-footed bigs is to put them in complex movement situations, not necessarily to just straight attack them in isolations, because it's a lot more difficult for almost everyone, almost every big man in the world, par maybe like Bam or Anthony Davis or Jaren Jackson, to navigate, let's say, a twirl action as guarding the screener, than to just straight defend someone in isolation where they can give a cushion with their length and slide their feet and maybe won't have to change directions as intensely. And Mobley is such a great offensive mover that I think you can really punish other bigs in that way. That's a way you could absolutely give Gobert nightmares, force him. I think Gobert is someone who can definitely is probably a little underrated in space, but force him to run off a pin down and there's nothing he can really do. It doesn't even have to be a traditional pin down. You can, thinking run Evan Mobley, start him in the corner, out of a horn set, and run a double staggered screen to get him to 15 feet. Kind of pin down into a curl like that, with other guys as the screener. And it's just most bigs cannot guard that. And then if they do, you have to force switches. And that obviously creates mismatches everywhere else where you can have guys like Van Fleet and Anunoby and Siakam attack other ways. So I think what I'm getting at is so many creative ways you can unlock Mobley's skill set. Many that I'm sure you or I could never think of. And hopefully some very smart offensive coach will get to, toy with Mobley and create create offensive situations that we can never even imagine. So yeah, I mean, I think the offensive fit is good. Maybe I think ideally, like I'm not sure, what the situation with Lowry is. Like you want someone who can, I think like him having someone who can really shoot pull-up threes like consistently is something you want for Mobley, just in terms of bending defenses. Like it's not a need certainly, but it's something I think he could use a lot. But I mean, yeah, that's just kind of being nitpicky. Like it'll be a good offensive fit.
Yeah, I'll just to expand on like the Raptors end, and I'll lean on what you've said about Mobley already, but the examples you brought where he could be of use, and specifically watching in my time watching Mobley's film, the Raptors in this past year, their worst year in a long time, they struggled particularly to get value out of the dunker spot with Aaron Baynes, out of the pick and roll with Aaron Baynes, and they got unique value out of Chris Boucher running him in, as you said, staggers, twirl actions, flares, all that kind of stuff. So the infrastructure is already there for Mobley to kind of step into actions that he would presumably fit quite well in. And especially since Fred VanVleet is a point guard who is much better at hitting, guys on the short roll than he is on the rim run, I think it fits quite well. And it also, Pascal Siakam was a guy who was in the 90th percentile or above in a lot of the big man playmaking metrics. Obviously metrics as far as playmaking goes, and if you want to get into the weeds on that stuff, it's tough to calculate, but the fact that they recognize him as a good playmaker and that counting stats do as well is a very good thing. And if you watch the tape, that Pascal has made a lot of strides and was mitigated by Baynes's inability both as a shooter and in the dunker spot. So I think there's a very easy ability to plug in for Mobley in a lot of ways. So that sounds all very good. Do you want to, and actually let's just to get into the micro stuff, certain actions you've seen him really thrive in, passes that you've seen him make against certain defenses. Just if you could highlight some things you've seen that you really liked, if there's any specifics you have in mind.
Like the elbow get snug pick and roll is really the main thing that stands out to me. Like he and his brother, Isaiah Mobley, who, just a fantastic duo. Having either, you can run him as the screener because he's an incredible lob threat and roll threat. You can run him as the ball handler because he can make live dribble passes and pass with his length. I think thing with Mobley, his length enables passes, wraparound passes that other guys just don't have access to. You'll often hear about tall passers being so valuable because their height just opens up passing angles. As wonderful a passer as Trae Young is, there are just passes that aren't available to him that someone like Luka can do. And obviously Mobley has the height, but he also has the length where he can snake his arm around a defender and hit a wrap pass or a lay down or something like that.
Is there any cross-court passes that you're seeing from Mobley often? On the short roll, is he, let's say the weak side zone, is he playing the cat and mouse game and winning it often as a passer?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, there are definitely instances where, like I said, more complex off-ball defenses can get to him. But I think especially this shines against double teams where it's just really difficult to double Mobley because he's so disciplined and has the high-level processing to kind of shred those. I mean, you will rarely see him panic and turn it over. At the bare minimum, you'll see Mobley dribble the ball out and reset against doubles. And while that doesn't always create a spectacular advantage, it's obviously better than a turnover. And then, like I said, you'll see him catch and immediately whip a weak side corner skip pass from a dunker spot, short corner double. That's a thing he'll do pretty regularly. I think the UConn game comes to mind earlier in the year where he just consistently ruined those double teams. I think he did it against maybe Arizona State as well. He does it all the time. So yeah, I mean, that's the type of pass where, catching or in that, 15, 14, 13 foot area on either side of the key where, maybe a weak side double will come. And then, he's able to read and process that so well. Obviously, longer and more athletic and bigger defenders and better off-ball defenders could definitely give him trouble early in his career. But because of how instantaneous of a processor is, how quickly he reads the floor, how quickly, his sense of where his teammates are on the floor, his ability to read those spots and get those balls out. That doesn't even talk about his ability to just kind of shoot over smaller double teams. like if you send like a point guard at him on his left shoulder, it's not really going to do much because he can just turn and drop it over. So yeah, I mean, he's those double team passes definitely stand out. I mean, that's not specifically an action, but that's an instance where I think his passing really shines.
We made USAA insurance for veterans like Liz and Mike. When they got a bigger car for their soon-to-be bigger family, USAA helped them get covered and find savings.
That was the easy part.
USAA, what you're made of, we're made for.
Okay. I feel pretty good about what we've discussed about his offense. I feel like that was pretty good. Do you have, before we move on to the other side of the ball, is there anything you want to highlight offensively for him?
I think we've about covered it. I mean, he's again, offensively, like again, just the scalability, the high end outcomes, all of it's so great. Yeah.
Okay, so when people discuss Evan Mobley, Chris Bosh and Anthony Davis come to mind quite often for people. Bosh, I think, has been the comp for basically every kind of rangy and long big who has offensive chops in college. And Anthony Davis, equally so for defenders who are rangy and long. Like Jaren Jackson Jr., of course, got Anthony Davis comps. Evan Mobley, of course, was going to get the Anthony Davis comps. But defensively, and from a draft analyst that I know both you and I really, really like and think is very intelligent, he said that Evan Mobley was a better prospect than Anthony Davis. That doesn't mean that he's going to be better than Anthony Davis. That doesn't mean he's going to be Anthony Davis. Just that his current floor, his skill set is a better starting place, potentially, than Anthony Davis. So defensively, I think is where a lot of people see a lot of value in Mobley. And the offensive scalability, of course, is super valuable. And defense plays a part in that. But let's do the cliff notes and we'll start to dig in. What makes Mobley special defensively?
Yeah, if the offense sounded good to you, think we'll start with Evan Mobley is a defense first prospect. That's for sure. I can probably guess who the draft analyst you're mentioning is. I mean, I'm not privy really to Anthony Davis. Like I wasn't around for Prospect Davis. Like I was like 12, but from what I know, I think I'd agree with that assessment. Mobley's mobility is on a different level, and we talk about the coordination, the fluidity offensively. Defensively, that shines just as much. Like all of the kind of tools that we mentioned offensively, the coordination, the length, the fluidity, the flexibility, like his intersection of physical tools, intelligence, like processing, feel, and technical prowess are one of a kind, unlike nothing I've ever seen. It's an experience on its own. And then again, like for the high end outcomes, we think about strength as a potential concern. But, because, of course, strength can be improved and because of all the other ways that he compensates that strength, which we'll get into, I'm not that worried. And, he's the very clear, obvious best defensive prospect in this class, the best one I've ever studied by a mile, and just unlike anything I've ever seen defensively. We'll try to make that picture clear.
Okay, so let's discuss where he stands out in his, if you're paying attention, like, I'm not sure if he went to EYBL, but at the very least at USC, what are the defensive situations you've seen him really shine in? Some guys it's, navigating at the nail. Some guys it's in drop. What have you seen from Mobley that's really nice?
Everywhere. Into it. We'll start with his rim protection, both primary and weak side. Unbelievable. Primary rim protection, as a center, it's fantastic. Like his timing and, like along with the length, like his timing and, just instincts as a rim protector are, beyond comprehension for a guy his age. So ridiculously special as a primary rim protector, walling off on drives. He will, hop up 2 feet. He gets off the floor so fast, no load time, not much load time at all on his jumps. Will get up, time blocks perfectly. The way he tracks the ball in midair is really special. Like you will often see him like turn his body with his incredible balance and body control in midair to track a ball, on its way down or, or to get to a ball at its apex and block it without goaltending, without fouling, just getting to a shot that he really shouldn't be able to. His positioning is awesome, very, very regularly in the right spot, to make blocks early on rotations, just able to anticipate where offenses are going and where drives are coming from, and then where bigs are, are making their moves to contest and wall up. And then, even when he's not able to, rely on the positioning, his tools will take over. I think my favorite Mobley play of the year, and maybe my favorite prospect play, like all cycle, it was in a game earlier in the season, maybe like Santa Clara, I'm not sure, but he wasn't perfectly positioned, and he allowed a driver to kind of like get past him in midair. Like he didn't really wall up perfectly, and so he was behind a guy, with a clear lane to the rim in midair. So what Mobley does is, he takes his left arm and he basically like rotates it 180 degrees behind his body to block the ball, like without looking. And it wasn't a foul. And it was just like one of those unbelievable things. And, beyond that play itself being incredible, like that's just a good microcosm to me to Evan Mobley is just incredible. Like he does ridiculous things. And then even like as a post defender, like, yes, he's going to get thrown off of his spot. He's going to like, you can drop a shoulder into Evan Mobley and send him flying backwards. Absolutely. And, that was an issue where college centers would put him in the rim, which is not what you want to see from a 7-foot center. But even when that's the case, like he often can compensate with his ridiculous reach. Like he will get thrown back and still be able to make a contest because of that length and that timing. Like, you'll even see him block shots sometimes after being pushed back in the post. And then, that's just the primary rim protection. As a weak side rim protection, because of the movement skill, the long distance movement skill and instincts, he covers ground like no other, which is, to me, maybe like the most important defensive skill in the modern NBA. With how spaced the floors are and how quick the ball moves and how prevalent things like skip passes are, and how teams are more and more trying to force closeouts, attack tilted defenses. Mobley can counter that with his ability to get it on the floor, cover large swaths of court very quickly with long strides, be in the right spot, and like I said, time those blocks perfectly from the weak side. And make those rotations coming from the corner, as tagging the pick and roll, many things like that. So the rim protection is definitely what stands out most for Mobley. But like he can do everything. Like he can cover every pick and roll. He can drop, he can hedge, he can switch, he can ice. He can play at the level of the screen. He can play really deep if you want him to. He can switch on an island in a pinch when he's needed. I wouldn't call him like a switch big because those don't really exist,
right?
But like he can slide with guards, like he routinely makes college guards look like children on the perimeter, like sliding with them. You can stick him in the middle of, like, the Raptors can stick him in the middle of their 2-3 zone and let him block everything if they so please. Just the versatility defensively as well is just amazing. Again, like core strength, the high hips, could definitely see an issue if some team decides to have him guard screens, which like almost no one's going to have the personnel to do that. Like, is he going to struggle against like guys like Embiid and Jokic in the post? Yeah, probably. No one really has an answer for those guys. Like there really aren't. Like this goes for like pretty much every superstar offensive player, not just post-centric bigs, but like who's guarding Embiid and Jokic in the post? Like no one can.
Even for the Raptors, like everybody wanted to pretend that it was just Gasol on an island. But the truth is that dig downs from Lowry, Fred, Pascal, OG were a huge part of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's nobody is going against Embiid. And that's why he is a uniquely gifted player to just run a post-up offense through, because there's nobody who can do it. So, if Mobley can't do that, is that something you're losing out on compared to another prospect or a current player in the league? Not really.
Yeah, like of course Mobley's he's gonna get eviscerated by Embiid on post-ups. Big deal. So what? So is 99% of the rest of the big men in the league. But again, for the Raptors, like a team you really believe in to provide that help defense infrastructure, to have those, like you said, those guys digging at the nail, the weak side helpers, to offer players like Embiid all they can handle. There's only so much you can do against superstar offensive players. But and then even like there's going to be instances where Mobley, even in matchups where he's losing, can win with length and timing and like pulling the chair and such. But it's like he's gonna have weaknesses there, but like it's far from a game-breaking weakness, like or like a debilitating one, I think.
Yeah, for Raptors fans to understand what Mobley might be able to do, even when he's beat Minnesota. Is it Jaden or Jalen on Minnesota?
They have Jaden.
Okay,
Jalen
right. Jalen's on the Hornets, right? On Minnesota, just a fantastic job of he takes a bump from Siakam, and you can see he's clearly looks like a guy who's out of the play. But that length, that ability to swivel and just get that huge go-go gadget arm back in the way can deter shots. And Mobley will be able to do that until he puts on the, however much weight he needs to carry to be optimized at the NBA.
Mobley is, a bigger, taller, longer, better mover than Jaden McDaniels. So Jaden's a great defender. Like I was a decently big Jaden fan coming out. And Mobley's just that's a good way to conceptualize it. Like smaller guys who will lose in some ways, but because of their other strengths compensate for those losses. And it's all about having those recovery tools. And definitely Mobley is gonna excel there.
Okay, and then so a big part of being a big man in the NBA is defending the floor in a different way than guards defend the floor. It's also why big men take usually a longer time to develop defensively, is because as a big, you're guarding in proximity to the rim rather than your man a lot of the time. And proximity to the rim changes because the size of the court changes. How does Mobley move in concert with the size of the court? Does he play guys into the baseline as an extra defender? How are his hips and where are his feet pointed when he's hedging on the pick and roll to deny the pass over top? Stuff like that.
As I mentioned, Mobley, one of his many strengths defensively, he's going to be uber versatile in the pick and roll. Often he was tagged responsible with high hedging, where he's totally able to force guards all the way out to near half court and recover. Super flexible hips. Like I mentioned, he does have really high hips, which definitely could be an issue as he puts on weight, if those become stiff. But right now, he has very flexible hips for a big man. He can swivel, he can change directions in that way, while he's sliding, use those hips to change directions. Again, not incredibly perfect technically, definitely can overplay hedges, or in drop defense, maybe you'll see plays where he's not positioned perfectly. But especially with evaluating college bigs, it's difficult to know, because I think more than maybe people give credit for, a lot of defensive mistakes for college bigs are going to be scheme related. And whether that's understanding scheme or a fault of the scheme, those are different problems. I don't think you'll have any problem with Evan Mobley understanding a scheme. He's a genius, and he's not going to miss you. And it's not possible to know without inside information which plays are a fault of whether or not that layup or that jumper Evan Mobley allowed was a fault of poor processing or misreading the coverage, or if that was what he was instructed to do, or if that was a miscommunication by his teammate. But I think this is is exactly what you asked, but I think it's salient here is he's an awesome communicator. You will see him pointing and directing traffic on the back line. I think one of my favorite little Mobley moments from this season was really early, where he I think multiple times in a game he facilitated the scram switch where he threw out his his guard who was matched up with the big in the post, and took that matchup and was able to save a mismatch and get his defensive troops in order. That's something you'll see him doing pretty regularly, pointing out to his teammates. I think kind of the way I think of Mobley's defense is it's like his offense, where he wants to make the right play and he wants to make the proper rotations and follow the coverages and the schemes. But often I think you'll see him go through this in real time, and you can imagine him realizing oh crap, my teammates are not scheming right. I'm just going to take over and sprint from the weak side and then block this shot anyways. So, but I think in a more disciplined scheme, again, USC was far from an ideal context for him. He made it work because he's special, but there were a lot of issues there, both offensively and defensively, with lineup construction and scheme. Like I said, he was often playing with 3 other 6'8+ dudes, which definitely has some advantages, but as you can imagine, has drawbacks both offensively and defensively. So I mean, I think technically, as you know, as a pick and roll defender, the way he covers space is just the big macro takeaway. He's not going to be, and maybe listeners who don't know Mobley, who watch the playoffs are worried about, rightfully worried about, like, can you play this big man prospect off the floor in the playoffs? And with Evan Mobley, I say the answer is resounding, like almost assuredly no.
Okay. And so particularly in the context of the Raptors, who, as you highlighted, his ability to scram and to make reads like that, independent of anything else, and to, well, if everything breaks down, he still has the sense to get over to contest the rim and stuff like that. It's just a guiding principle makes him a good defender. And when that's in concert with his abilities, his talent, and his extremely long extremities on his body, that works extremely well. But in kind of the helter-skelter scheme that the Raptors have run, which became, I guess, pretty famous across the league, I assume you're somewhat familiar with the Raptors defense. What do you make of him as the 5 in that unit?
I think it makes a lot of sense. Again, like being I'm not like perfectly into the scheme. I have an idea. I think he works really well in a help-oriented defense, because not only can he orchestrate that traffic himself, he can be an active participant as well. Being the backline defender, communicator, knowing he can protect the rim while having competent defenders digging and stunting and helping in front of him, while also being, I don't think you want him playing at the 4 like full time, but I think he's someone who can absolutely do it because of the ground coverage and because of his ability to be a guy. Like he was never asked to do this, but he should be like an incredible nail defender with his like ground coverage and length and timing. Like he should be able to totally muck up offenses at the free throw line or free throw line extended in range. Be able to make weak side tags and things like that. So I think he works spectacularly. He can switch in a pinch if needed. Again, like you're not going to throw him on guards for an extended period of time because that's just a nonsensical thing to do. But he can do it if needed. Like he's going to be someone who can switch in a pinch, maybe even more than a pinch, and be competent there. Which again is just so important. Like that he's not going to be a liability, especially in the playoffs where teams are known to target and hunt liabilities on both ends of the floor. And, Mobley just almost certainly is not, in almost every matchup, is not going to be able to be that.
Mm-hmm. Projects is like a very futuristic big in that instead of having just these absurd, a specialist in one area that's been hyper-focused on the court, like a post-up big in a different era, he can translate to a lot of different contexts and find success in every single one of them. In his year at USC, was there anything you were disappointed with that didn't come along like you would have hoped?
That's a good question. Honestly, I guess this is a good excuse to talk about his development. I mean, I think the main thing would just be instances where he was not as aggressive as a scorer as you'd hope. That's definitely the main thing I would say. Otherwise, I mean, there's really not much to be disappointed by, especially because getting a little bit into Mobley's background, like he was one of those like 6th, 7th grade prodigies, like best player in the world at that age. And a lot of time players at that age, that young, peter off when other guys, catch up physically or, skill wise. His junior year of high school, Mobley was the best prospect in the world, number 1 recruiting services. He played with, I believe it was Under Armour. Don't quote me on that. Under Armour or Adidas. It wasn't UIBL. But like he had success against top bigs in those matchups. And then his senior season was really disappointing. He just wasn't really as effective on either end. His team construction was weird. Like he wasn't like featured as much as he should have, and he just looked really, really checked out. And obviously he dropped a little bit per consensus, and draft Twitter people were lower on him. So then the question was, what was he going to look like against better competition at USC in the Pac-12? I think he pretty immediately assuaged all of our concerns. Looking like his old self in terms of monster defensively, really the movement on offense and the offensive skill. I mean, I think like this is as great of a season as you could expect from Mobley. Like the things it's really nitpicky. Like you wish you wish he was more effective as a scorer. You wish he shot a couple more threes. Like maybe his 3-point attempts per 100 instead of 2 could be 4. And also maybe you wish he played in a different context. Maybe you wish he had more matchups against top bigs. That's definitely a thing where he kind of didn't really match up against a great big man until Drew Timme in the tournament, and he was he was pretty solid, I think, in that Gonzaga game as well. Obviously, just team-wise overmatched, but he never really had the chance to go up against a really great college bigs. But all of those are just pretty minor concerns to me, many pretty minor disappointments. So, coming into this draft prospects, like tentatively positive, but I think that was definitely uncertain about Mobley. Like there was definitely a world where he disappointed and was like a more 6, 7, 8 range prospect than like this surefire, one of the best prospects of the decade type prospect. So.
Okay. And so something I've learned after talking to a lot of draft guys is not asking for predictions, but let's do a range of outcomes. What is your range of outcomes for Evan Mobley? And feel free to take as short or as long on this as you'd like.
Yeah. Range of outcomes are definitely a better way to think of it, I think, than like comparisons or like straight up what is it. Because I think thinking about, how a prospect fails and, what happens if a prospect fails is really important to me, at least. Because that's often like very, very more nuanced than it gets credit for. As we talked about, high-end outcome, maybe impact-wise the best player on a championship team. Not the probably not the primary driver of their offense, but all defensive player of the year level player, and like an offensive number 2, like I said at the top. But then even a low-end outcome, like he probably can, like I'm trying not to like get carried away with this. Like I really think like his like low-end outcomes are like, he approaches all-star impacts like at some point in his career. Like I just have such a hard time seeing Mobley completely failing because of just how special he is. Like I mentioned, like even if he's not self-creating, even if his shooting is just like average or a little below average, like he's still going to be an incredible role man, and he's going to have the passing and the big man dribbling and simple DHOs and actions. Then defensively, like the weak side rim protection, if he's not strong enough for primary rim protection, and he's going to be able to be mobile in pick and roll coverages and be a useful playoff big man. So I think maybe like just like top 50 player ballpark, top 50, top 60 low end. That's not like a concrete number. Like don't take it as gospel, anybody. But that's kind of my, like, I have a really hard time imagining him really busting. Like he's kind of as foolproof of a prospect as he's as foolproof a big man prospect as they really come, which is, I think, definitely rare in a league where big men are becoming, the demand and like the pressure on big men is like greater and greater for them to do more and be more things and play more roles and cover more weaknesses. But part of that is what makes Mobley really unique, because I think he's kind of proof to that.
It's also interesting that his low end outcomes, with what you're saying, with what I've noticed myself, is that his low end outcomes still seems to be a guy who will translate extremely well to playoff basketball, which is a very unique and interesting thing for a big man prospect as well.
Yeah, that's super important as well. Like, somehow in some world he doesn't become a starter, like, which I just can't fathom. But like if it happens, like he's someone who's going to be useful. Like I said, like he can play at the level of the screen against really dangerous pull up shooters. If you get him on a team with a really dangerous pick and roll initiator, he can roll hard to the rim, catch lobs, just catch errant passes as well and finish strong, or make simple passes, simple decisions, like additive stuff. Like he is like, he is like the perfect ceiling raising prospect. Like he's a guy who, like, again, like if you just have Mobley and like no other offensive engine, like it's probably not going to work. But if you have those pieces in place, which is why he's such, while he's at the same time a team building challenge and a team building blessing because of how scalable he is. but you're going to need places because he is someone who, if you have the pieces, he can, I think, really raise the ceiling of both your offense and your defense with additive skills, shooting, like the passing, the touch stuff, the play finishing. Those are all like really additive skills, which I think Mobley is going to be great at, even if he isn't someone who can contribute his own offenses regularly as maybe he could.
Okay. The last question I'll ask you before we get out of here is probably the most difficult one. And if you're angry at me for it, I understand. But we've seen in the NFL, this is a really big thing. In the NBA, prospects have gotten to such an advanced point, especially at their age, considering where the NBA comes from, guys who are playing 3 or 4 years in college, then came and dominated. But now you have guys like Luka or Trae Young, really young guys who are on rookie scale contracts who are contributing to extremely impressive teams. Obviously, Trae on an Eastern Conference Finals team. Luka, you assume that they'll get over the hump the first round in his rookie contract.
A lot of it
out of his, like,
give Luka the Hawks and they're a contender. Like,
right, yeah. What do you make of Evan Mobley's rookie scale contract? Do you think there's an opportunity for the team that drafts him to be able to have him as a focal point of a very, very highly achieving team while he's on that contract?
I think so. It's not going to be as clean as someone like Luka or Trae because he's not an initiator, and just like or even guys like lower level primary like Ja and Donovan, just young primary guys like that, where it makes sense to kind of construct a team around them. Like it'll look different. Like it won't look like you just don't see a lot of prospects like this. But I definitely think by like age 22, Mobley could be a guy who is approaching that. Depending on his offensive development, I think he's already going to be an amazing defensive player by then. And building teams around defense maybe isn't as talked about like the mainstream and guys like that, but like he is your anchor. And then depending on the offensive development, like I could definitely see like by the end of his rookie scale contract being like the second best player on the championship team. Like absolutely. Like, and again, it's going to take creativity, and it's not going to maybe be as clean and as maybe I'm not sure the word, like as traditional as like Luka or Trae or even like the new wave of stars we're seeing. But I definitely think it's feasible, even if not guaranteed, but it's definitely feasible. Especially the fact that Mobley is a little bit older, which is kind of a concern. I'm not like, just because of how good he is in his development curve, I'm not like largely concerned. Like he is already 20 years old, which is a bit old for a freshman aged rookie. But again, it's not a huge concern for me given where he's at in his development. Okay.
Is there anything else you want to talk about regarding Evan Mobley before we let you get out of here?
Not really. I mean, I think it's probably a long shot that he makes it to 4. Unfortunately, if we've gotten Raptors fans' hopes up after this, I mean, I'd say like there's going to be a good option at 4 for sure, even if it's not Mobley. I mean, I think Mobley shouldn't get past 2. I definitely think I could see him getting to 3. I don't know about getting past. I also think Mobley is someone you push your chips in to trade up for if at all possible. Like if he slides to 3 and you think Cleveland is taking Mobley, to me he's someone worth going for in a trade up, because the drop off between him and anyone else you can get is gargantuan. So that's where I'd stand. If anybody with power in that front office here's this, like, go trade up for Mobley. He'll be worth it. But yeah, he's fantastic, and just definitely one of my few favorite guys in this class. Like he's just an experience to watch him play. Like there are truly few players like him. Even like the bad games have moments where he's just doing crazy stuff. So he's just so fun to watch, and I definitely think the Raptors would be a good spot for him developmentally and fit wise. I wish him the best, and that would be very cool.
There's roughly like 5,000 people who listen to this podcast. So hopefully somebody in the Raptors organization says, we're trading for Mobley. Ben Pfeifer sent me. Let's make it happen. But the floor is yours, man, to plug anything you want, or, if you don't want to plug yourself, some people recommend books, whatever it works for you. The floor is yours, dude. And yeah.
I am taking a little Twitter break for mental health at the moment. Would recommend that to people, definitely. It's okay to take care of yourself. I don't know if you had someone plug positive mental health messaging, but it's okay to not be okay. But yeah, I mean, I'll be back on Twitter eventually, definitely before the drafts. When I'm there, you can find me at Ben_Pfeifer_ on Twitter. I post clips and just like voice threads about prospects in my like low effort return to like draft stuff. Just whatever else. I don't think I have anything else to plug. Take care of yourself. And just enjoy prepping for the draft. Draft season is really fun. It's definitely, my favorite time of the basketball year. And thanks, and a big thanks to you for having me on. This was a blast.
I've had an absolute blast talking about it, and positive mental health messaging has not been plugged. You're a trailblazer, and a good one at that. But Ben, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Okay, and listener, it really depends when you end up listening to this. Whenever Ben does hop back on Twitter, I'll make sure to just go back and link his stuff in the piece once that's available to link. Right now, it's a dead link, but it will be live if you're listening to this, down the road and you want to go click him and follow him for more info, because he's not just a Mobley guy. He's got his eye on a few prospects and has valuable insights on all of them. But thank you very much, listener, whether you got into this in the morning or at night. Mobley at 4 would be quite a lucky stroke. But thanks for tuning in. Have a blessed day, and goodbye. And goodbye. And goodbye. And goodbye. And goodbye.